Cosford hosts the RAF's only public air show of the year, and in 2025 the event showcased a broad cross-section of British military aviation past and present, joined by high-profile guests from abroad.
Hello, welcome to the RAF Cosford Air Show 2025, our second and probably final UK air show on this series of air show dispatches. Now, when it comes to organising an international air show, it really is a matter of momentum. And unfortunately, the COVID pandemic did sap some of the momentum from Cosford. Well, the momentum is firmly back on their side now. This is a team that is really motivated at the moment, and a team that is happy to play the long game as well. Even before the 2025 lineup was announced, they were already putting in the legwork, hopefully starting to secure acts for 2026 and 2027. Now, they won't know whether those efforts have been fruitful for months and months and months. We, the public, won't find out for probably a couple of months after that, but nonetheless, this does feel like a show that is on the up, with a really strong lineup penciled in for this year. Unfortunately, a few last-minute cancellations have taken the shine off things slightly, but nonetheless, this is a show that is still delivering very strongly on its remit. You'll see more British military display teams here than at any other air show in the 2025 season. Also some relevant Warbirds, some family entertainment, and some high-profile visitors from abroad. Let's take a look at the lineup and running order.
Some lighter acts to start off with, then the big hitters, Typhoon, F-35 and NATO A330, the latter two doing flypasts rather than displays. Polish F-16 in just under half an hour, Red Arrows and PC-7 team are our two national teams, and we have the Royal Navy's Black Cats as well. The Chinook rounds things out. Opening the show, the RAF Falcons, jumping from a Dornier 228. Falcons have an enormously entertaining show this year. We saw it last week at the Midlands Air Festival in excellent weather conditions. The cloud base was a little lower at Cosford though, so the opening manoeuvre was cut out on this occasion. But what remains is still excellent. This is the crisscross, flown with a closing speed of about 45 miles an hour, and it leads into the carousel. The carousel introduced back in 2021 as part of a major shake-up of the RAF Falcons display, and it's become their trademark manoeuvre. Battle of Britain Memorial Flight came next with their first of two displays. This is the traditional BBMF-3 ship, comprising one Lancaster, one Hurricane and one Spitfire. It's the first time the trio has flown together at an air show since 2023. They were unable to fly in this configuration last year, and their early season shows this summer were flown with two Spitfires but no Hurricane. The Hurricane is Mark IIC LF363, which is believed to be the last Hurricane to enter RAF service. It first flew in June 1944. But it's painted to represent a Hurricane Mark I, V6665, flown by 303 Polish Squadron, one of the most illustrious Battle of Britain units. The The Spitfire is an actual Battle of Britain veteran, Mark IIA P7350, although it too is painted in the identity of another, representing a Spitfire Mark I flown by New Zealander Al Deer during the Battle of Britain as part of 54 Squadron. The two fighters engaged in a rather low-energy tail chase, after which the Lancaster came through for a couple of solo passes, in what is a new BBMF routine for this year that largely shuns solo flypasts and aerobatics in favour of formation passes. The Lancaster is one of over 7,000 built. It was constructed in 1945, destined for the Tiger Force that would have paved the way for an invasion of the Japanese mainland. But the war ended before it could be put to use in that role. Today it's one of just two Lancasters surviving in airworthy condition. A second BBMF display later in the day paired the Spitfire 2A with a Spitfire PR-19. The PR-19, which has been inactive for the previous 3 seasons during a major maintenance programme, now wears a paint scheme that reflects how this aircraft looked back in July 1957 when it joined the historic aircraft flight, the forerunner to the BBMF. Periodic squalls of rain came and went during the first few hours of the show, and Fighter Aviation Engineering's P-47D Thunderbolt found itself flying in probably the worst weather of the day. It's amazing to think that the P-47 was originally conceived as a lightweight fighter, because what resulted was the largest and heaviest single-engine piston fighter in history. The aircraft was quite literally designed around its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine. It was sturdy, rugged, and able to absorb enormous amounts of battle damage. This particular aircraft flew in US service as a trainer in the mid-1940s before moving to the Peruvian Air Force. It then embarked on a civilian career that encompassed both the UK and the USA.
Mention that, Andy, because some years ago I met a veteran of the 78th Fighter Group.
A last-minute addition to the flying display, Kennett Aviation's O-1E Bird Dog in the colours of the South Vietnamese Air Force. This was added to the show just one day prior, having previously been due to appear on static display only, and that was due to the cancellation of the Rafale Solo display, Great War display team, Vampire T-11 and the Army Air Corps roll demonstration, which left a few gaps in the flying programme. Developed from the civilian Cessna 170, the Bird Dog was an observation aircraft. High-performance combat jets of the day flew too fast to accurately spot enemy positions, so the Bird Dog would go in first, locate the enemy and guide the fighters in for their attack. Often the Bird Dogs were fitted with phosphorus rockets under the wings, used to mark the target. Last week we saw the RAF Tutor display team flying with their yellow and black special scheme aeroplane, but this week they're flying in a Tutor with a more conventional colour scheme.
Orb now rolls 90 degrees while pointing straight up before completing a stall turn at almost zero airspeed. The two 90-degree turns allow Bob to continue in the same direction. The Tutor is operated by No. 6 Flying Training School in partnership with Babcock International, primarily flying University Air Squadron students at RAF Air Cadets. There are 13 air experience flights across the UK that offer flights.
The Tutor is the only aircraft type to be based here at Cosford, as part of the University of Birmingham Air Squadron. Tutors are the mainstay of the University Air Squadron fleets around the country. They're also used for air experience flights, flight instructor training and evaluation, and, to a very limited extent, elementary flying training, although the EFT role has mostly now been taken over by the far more modern Prefect T1. Cosford was the second show of the season for the Royal Air Force's Typhoon FGR-4 solo display, flown by Flight Lieutenant Nathan Scheuer. This display unfolded during another squall of rain under some very low cloud. It's an extremely compact display, though it wasn't especially close to the spectators. Here's something technically rather interesting: 5 consecutive aileron rolls. It's not often that we see that from the Typhoon, because it tends to lose about 3 degrees of attitude per roll, so executing 5 consecutive rolls requires a substantial pull back on the stick before the manoeuvre commences, and some very careful altitude monitoring throughout. For the first time this year, the Typhoon display team is using a Typhoon Tranche 2, in this case it's ZK324. Cosmetically, these look virtually the same as the Tranche 1s that we saw in the past, but the Tranche 2s have been better future-proofed and are easier to upgrade. They also include a new mission computer and compatibility with longer-range air-to-air missiles, laser-guided bombs and anti-radiation missiles. Negative G turn there with fuel venting from the transfer line at the tip of the tail. That transfer line allows the release of pressure during the negative G manoeuvres and also allows air to escape from the fuel tanks during refuelling. Cosford this year, the Typhoon took second place in the Flying Display Awards, finishing behind the Swiss Air Force PC-17. For the final pass, the Typhoon punches vertically upwards into the clouds. Here's a Warbird that we've never featured on Airshow dispatches before, and perhaps the prettiest Mustang in Europe, Jersey Jerk.
It came up with a design called the NA73.
It's painted to represent a P-51D Mustang flown by Major Donald Strait of the 361st Fighter Squadron, 356th Fighter Group. During the Second World War, Strait flew 122 missions, scoring 13.5 victories, making him the 356th Fighter Group's top-scoring pilot. Technically, though, this isn't a P-51. It's a Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation CA-18 Mustang Mark 21, which is the Australian licence-built version. After the end of the Second World War, CAC built 120 Mustangs in Australia, and they operated for about 3 years until the Royal Australian Air Force took delivery of jet-powered fighters.
In which role it was very successful.
This CA-18 was delivered to the RAF in 1948 and hardly used. It was sold for scrap in the 50s. Returned to flight in 2002, the aircraft lived in Australia ever since and wore 82 Squadron RAF colours, up until 2023, when it was dismantled, shipped to Britain and repainted as a US Army Air Force aircraft. It's time now for the vintage pair. This was both a real treat and a splendid surprise.
Pulling up into a very close formation loop.
Yes, that is two chipmunks doing formation aerobatics, and I don't think many people expected that.
Aerobatic chipmunk display. Solar arrows, yes, but not in formation.
The vintage pair has existed for a few years now, but they've been an entirely non-aerobatic team up until now. Indeed, most British-built chipmunks are technically now non-aerobatic due to life-expired wing spars. So it was remarkable to see this pair pitching into 3 consecutive close formation loops in what was probably the first chipmunk formation aerobatic display to be seen at a British airshow for well over a decade. Little wonder this display received special mention during the Flying Display Awards. The second aircraft in the formation was a Chipmunk Mark 22 in RAF colours, but the lead aircraft is a Chipmunk T20 in the colours of the Portuguese Air Force.
You can't just open the throttle and suddenly accelerate or hit the brakes and suddenly slow down. You've got to, in aviation we often talk about being ahead of the jet. We've certainly got to be here. They still have a Chipmunk, and we've got the historic Army aircraft flight Chipmunk. This is the Army Air Corps historic aircraft flight with the military hands here in standing display. And even in its primary role, certainly with University Air Squadron.
Incredibly, Portugal still operates the Chipmunk today. It's the last remaining Chipmunk operator, albeit they have been retrofitted with new cockpit instruments and Lycoming engines replacing the de Havilland Gypsy Major. We very much hope to see Portuguese chipmunks in action when we visit the country later on in this series of Airshow Dispatches.
Now we have the Grand they were still in service with the Army Air Corps until 1997.
Actually, I say the Portuguese Air Force is the last remaining military operator of the Chipmunk, but if we're going to be pedantic about it, there are still two examples officially on strength with the Royal Air Force. They're used by the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight for tailwheel training.
West Berlin, the Allies had the right to fly around the Berlin control zone, and they used the opportunity for reconnaissance with various helicopters, but also light aeroplanes like a fleet of Chipmunks. And one of the last Gatto station flight Chipmunks is one of the two with the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight today. In towards us for a lovely crossing break.
Next up, a flypast from an RAF F-35B Lightning of 207 Squadron at Mara. Last year at Cosford, we were treated to a full F-35 roll demonstration. That wasn't possible in 2025. The fleet is very heavily committed to various operations at the moment, most notably a carrier strike group deployment to the Far East, and working up a roll demonstration simply wasn't possible. These two passes will have to do. The Dutch-based NATO multi-role tanker transport capability routed one of their A330 MRTTs past Cosford during an operational sortie. This is essentially the same as the Royal Air Force's Voyagers, except the NATO-operated version has been fitted with a rigid boom in addition to underwing hose and drogue pods, and that allows them to refuel a far greater variety of receiver aircraft than their British counterparts. The multi-role tanker transport capability comprises the Netherlands, Norway, Luxembourg, Germany, Czechia and Belgium. They received their first aircraft in 2020 with an eventual fleet of 10 A330s at their disposal. This will likely increase to 12 should Denmark also join the programme. Also based in the Netherlands, this beautiful Spitfire LF9, visiting a British air show for the first time since 2013. This is part of the Royal Netherlands Air Force historic flight, and it's the only airworthy Spitfire in Dutch colours. This one was built in 1943 and it's an actual D-Day veteran, flying at that point in time with 485 New Zealand Squadron of the Royal Air Force. It was transferred to the Royal Netherlands Air Force in 1947 and remained in use until 1954. The aircraft was abandoned after retirement and then taken without permission by a group of RAF personnel who restored it to static display condition. After moving around several RAF bases, she was eventually gifted back to the Netherlands and a restoration to flight began. This was completed in 1993, and at the turn of the century she was purchased by the Dutch government and became part of the Royal Netherlands Air Force historic flight. The Polish Air Force's Tiger demo team returned to the UK for the first time since 2018. This display has improved dramatically since its last visit to these shores, with Captain Maciej Krakowian at the controls. It's now a very compact and aggressive performance. Poland purchased the F-16 as part of a drive to replace its ageing Soviet-era aircraft with NATO-compatible equipment. The first one was delivered in 2008, and at the time Poland's F-16s were the most advanced in NATO. As standard, they wear removable conformal fuel tanks. These not only carry more fuel than a traditional belly tank, but they also impose a much smaller performance penalty with minimal drag and no reduction at all to the aircraft's maximum load factor, which stands at 9G. One of the standout moments of the display was this superb dedication pass.
And now, final salute from the Tiger.
The Tiger demo team is one of Europe's newer fastjet solo displays, having been formed in 2015, and is now celebrating its 10th anniversary season. To mark its 10th year, the team will be performing at 10 air shows spanning 7 countries, and we'll hopefully get to see it again in Portugal later on this summer, where it will be likely displaying with flares. Some absolutely spectacular flying here from Melanie Astells, the reigning British national aerobatic champion. She starts with some incredible on-crowd rolls, commencing a display that got a special commendation at the Flying Display Awards.
Aerobatic Championship, becoming British national champion and the first British, or in her case Franco-British woman, to stand on a mixed international podium with an FAI medal. That's the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale of Sports Aviation, including aerobatics.
Melanie is a French-British aviator based in France and typically flying under the French flag. As well as being a British aerobatic champion, she was also the top-ranking woman at the French National Aerobatic Championships, and she was the first woman to compete in the Red Bull Air Race, flying in the Challenger class. The Extra 330SC dominates the top level of aerobatics. The type has been flown to victory at 6 World Championships on the trot and was the aircraft of choice for more than 2/3 of the pilots competing in the most recent World Aerobatic Championships held in 2024.
2.5 turns of that, a figure often referred to as a rod. 1 1/4 rolls there, heading towards you. 18 degrees back onto the display line. Multiple further rolls and then a hard 90-degree negative G turn.
Up into a torque roll, the torque of the engine causing the aircraft to rotate, akin to a helicopter without a tail rotor.
To terminate in a negative flick eventually.
And now we move into a mightily impressive sequence of predominantly negative G manoeuvring, pushing out of the torque roll and into a full outside loop.
Continuing into and through the vertical. And a complete outside loop described there.
A partial outside rolling circle, turning through 180 degrees while rolling continuously. Note the knife edge portions of the roll are being extended ever so slightly so Melanie can push forward on the stick and bring the aircraft round through the turn. And now pulling onto the B-axis, diving, and about to roll inverted and push.
Once again, pushing up.
Remarkable stuff.
Inverted. Ouch, that looks very uncomfortable indeed. A flick roll at the apex. When you read some of the classic books, Geoffrey Whelan especially, his description of flying the Harvard and then getting into a Spitfire. Yeah, not all Warbird pilots.
Here's a Harvard Mark IIB FE511 built by Nordauin Aviation in Montreal in 1942 and serving with the No. 6 Service Flying Training School of the Royal Canadian Air Force during the war.
He didn't fly a 2-seat Hurricane before he started flying his Hurricane. So yeah.
It's lived here in the UK since 2016 and is now part of the Hurricane Heritage Fleet alongside their 2 Hawker Hurricanes, and it's used for passenger experience flights. She wears the colour scheme of a Harvard provided to the RAF during the wartime Lend-Lease agreement with the United States.
Of those being that training out of the UK to places where it could be less easily disrupted by enemy action.
Up next, the RAF Red Arrows. To begin with, they found a gap in the cloud and managed to pull up into a loop, but immediately thereafter, they switched to the rolling show instead.
The aircraft slowed to approximately about 120 miles per hour, reaching a height of over 5,500 to 6,000 feet. As Red One brings
The Red Arrow's commitment to perfection is outstanding. Earlier this year, I had the privilege of sitting in on a debrief at the end of a practice flight, an almost hour-long process during which the pilots, all still laser-focused, relived the display in real time, dissecting their own performance and each other's in clinical detail.
an AFC for his service on operations over Afghanistan. Coming in from the left to celebrate the Royal Air Force new capability in space and cyber, this is Apollo.
The result of all that, combined with an unusually long and intensive winter training regime compared to many other teams, is that the Red Arrows fly at a remarkably steady standard throughout the display season. There are other aerobatic teams that we've featured on Airshow Dispatches recently, where it's possible to tell just from watching a couple of manoeuvres whether you're watching an early season show or a late season show. But with the Red Arrows, that's much harder to do. They start the season already flying at an incredibly high level.
It makes the pilots fly with a higher throttle setting, thereby producing a hotter engine gas temperature. It makes the smoke burn a lot more brightly, and it also creates an air disturbance outside the back of the aeroplane, making that smoke billow a lot more fuller, and therefore in certain manoeuvres we use it to enhance those manoeuvres.
We covered the Red Arrows 2025 debut display last week at the Midlands Air Festival, with a focus on some of the newly introduced manoeuvres that feature in the 2025 display routine. This time around we'll focus on the manoeuvres that we didn't show last week, including some established crowd favourites, like this one, Tornado.
Formation. Watch for the colour change as Red 1 brings them down the line. Myself, Red 10, this is my fourth and final year on the team. Former Tornado GR4 pilot, as well as being a qualified flying instructor on the Hawk T-Mark II. But of course, the Red Arrows is not just about the pilots. We have a team of over back in, looking for the red and blue from Red 8 and 9. Get your cameras ready for the Hannah break. Red 6 and 8 to our left-hand side, Red 7 and 9 to our right-hand side. Hannah and the synchro pair are led by Red 6, the synchro leader, squadron leader Tom Hansford. Tom is in his third and final year on the team, a former Typhoon pilot and qualified weapons instructor on the Typhoon.
Another differentiator between the Red Arrows and other display teams is that they are extremely adept at flying in the challenging British weather. The Reds can quite happily display with just a 1,000-foot cloud base and will still perform a very varied routine, including bomb bursts and opposition passes. Most other jet aerobatic teams require at least 1,500 feet of cloud base, and even then they'll cut out most of their dynamic manoeuvring. At Cosford today, the cloud was sitting at between 3,000 and 5,000 feet. More than enough for a spirited Red Arrows performance, as you can see from this manoeuvre called Boomerang, in which the synchro pair perform half Cubans. This is the only vertical manoeuvre that is still included in the rolling show, and it's possible because the loop radius of a solo hawk can be much tighter than that of a formation. They partially reverted back to the full show just in time for the final manoeuvre. In better conditions, the synchro pair would perform an opposition pass in front of this finale break. That wasn't possible on this occasion, but nonetheless, 7 jets pull up for the palm split, a manoeuvre that returns to the Red Arrows routine this year for the first time since 2019. More jet aerobatics from Strikemaster Display UK.
More expensive, complex, bespoke flight space, while also being suitable still as an advanced training. So they strengthen the airframe, they give extra armour protection. There's an upgraded version of the Rolls-Royce turbojet engine, and crucially 4 underwing weapon time points, which can carry gun packs, bombs, drop tanks, and so forth, which we will see demonstrated towards the end of this display. Because we use up the pyrotechnics that were intended for the Army Air Corps roll demonstration, but sadly...
The Strikemaster is the ultimate version of the Jet Provost, a training aircraft which several operators had pressed into combat use. BAC saw the potential to create a purpose-built combat version, with a slightly more powerful engine and 4 weapon stations on the wings. This was marketed to air forces looking for a low-cost, mixed-use platform which could serve as a light attack and counter-insurgency aeroplane, while also fulfilling the Jet Provost's original brief as a jet trainer.
In anger, in combat. Ecuador did so, South Yemen, but particularly Oman. Very nice little manoeuvre here, coming towards on the 45-degree line, and both doing a roll under.
The Sultan of Oman Air Force was a prolific user of the Strikemaster in combat. The grey aircraft in this formation used to fly for that air arm, and hence wears the registration Golf Sierra Oscar Alpha Foxtrot. It wears a genuine Omani 2-tone grey colour scheme.
That story told so well in Roland White's book Storm Front.
The more colourful aircraft flying in the lead also wears Omani colours, but it is in fact an ex-Republic of Singapore Air Force Strikemaster Mark 80, and hence it is registered Golf Romeo Sierra Alpha Foxtrot. Other Strikemaster operators included New Zealand, Kuwait, Botswana and others, but the type was never used by its native UK, who had no need of such an aeroplane.
This is not an all-weather aircraft. Now the 2 aircraft coming in for an opposition run this time.
The Strikemaster display was augmented by the addition of pyrotechnics that had been set out for the Army Air Corps roll demonstration. Sadly, the Army display was cancelled at short notice as the Apache fleet was grounded the day before the show, so suddenly there were some pyrotechnics going spare, and they were put to good use.
And as they pull up, they deliver the coup de grace.
Visiting the UK for the first time since 2022, this is the Swiss Air Force's PC-7 team, one of 2 major aerobatic teams of the Swiss Air Force.
After this overflight and exclamation change into Artemis, it looks like a rocket.
Sadly, the Swiss Air Force's airshow commitments have been substantially wound back this year. The F-18C Hornet solo display has been axed, and all remaining teams have had their schedules cut back by approximately 50%. The Swiss Air Force has also ceased hosting its own air shows, including the popular annual Axalp event, and things will soon get even more bleak, with the Patrie Suisse likely being disbanded this year or next. Fortunately, the PC-7 team remains as wonderful as ever, presenting a gorgeous aerial ballet that won them the Bill Hartree Trophy for the most entertaining display at this year's show.
Yes, these are our 2 soloists, and they will show us the so-called...
The PC-7 team was officially established in 1989 to mark the 75th anniversary of the Swiss Air Force. It's comprised of full-time F-18 Hornet fighter pilots and instructors, who form this team in their spare time, in addition to their regular duties.
The activities related to the PC-7 team is their weekend work, so their side job, so to say. So we have fighter jet pilots who, in addition to their main job, get together and propel aircraft to perform this display. And we see the 2nd crossing already now, and we expect the 3rd crossing just in front of us. Very nice, flown
The PC-7 is the primary training aircraft of the Swiss Air Force. They don't actually have an elementary trainer, you go straight onto one of these. Switzerland has 27 of them. They entered service in the early 1980s, but they've been upgraded since then with new glass cockpits. Special smoke systems were developed by Pilatus in 2014. They can be temporarily installed in the PC-7's luggage compartment. The Air Force has 7 such systems, which is why you'll never see all 9 aircraft smoking at the same time. But the smoke systems can be swapped between aircraft as required on the ground.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for us to be here with you here at Cosford. I hear over the radio the pilots are having fun. They are quite concentrated, but they are really happy to fly here. And we expect already our...
This stunning manoeuvre is called the Rheinfall, named after Switzerland's biggest waterfall. Like many of their manoeuvres, it's accentuated by bespoke music composed by the brother of a former team leader.
I would also like to introduce these pilots to you. In the front, the sub-leader of the PC-7 team, Captain Marius Ecker, nicknamed Bleu, followed by Captain Yannick Lauber, nicknamed Cindy, then Captain Sandro Chinook, nicknamed Yuri, then Pascal Haltenstein, nicknamed Aldi, and in the back, our soloist, Captain Silvan Andrecken, nicknamed Goro. Thank you very much.
This is the team's trademark manoeuvre, called the tunnel.
Cross this tunnel in any moment. Have a close look now. Now we probably come to the most patriotic part, pure Swissness. The PC-17 presents the Swiss Cross, an extremely difficult formation to fly.
So, Swiss pilots, Swiss aeroplanes, and they're flying in the shape of the Swiss Cross. It really is maximum Swissness during their penultimate pass.
Is a worthy ambassador of the Swiss Air Force and Swiss Armed Forces. We are approaching the end of our flight demonstration. I now hand over for the closing words to the leader of the PC-7 team, Captain Andreas Menk, called Menkster, and I switch directly into the cockpit.
And now they approach for the grand finale. A remarkable combination of old and new here, with Taranto formation representing around 90 years of Fleet Air Arm history. In the lead, Navy Wing's Swordfish Mark I, and following behind it, the 2 Wildcat HMA-2s of the Royal Navy Black Cat display team.
A longer rear fuselage and the ability to operate on either wheels or floats. moving in for a break.
The Swordfish entered service in 1936, despite being pretty much obsolete by that time, and it served not just with the Fleet Air Arm, but also with the Royal Canadian Air Force and Royal Netherlands Navy. It was initially used in the fleet attack role, and indeed it sank a greater tonnage of Axis shipping than any other Allied aircraft type during the Second World War. Incredibly, it remained in frontline service all the way through until VE Day, having outlived some of the aircraft intended to replace it. Navy wings have two Swordfish, well, three technically, but one of them is just used for spare parts. Of those, this is the only one currently airworthy. It was built by Blackburn in 1941 and thus would technically have been known as a Blackfish rather than a Swordfish during its service career.
Instead, all they had was a row of...
And here come the Black Cats themselves, starting their display with a pair of on-crowd wingovers. The Black Cats were formed in 2001, originally flying the Lynx, but they swapped to its successor, the Wildcat, in 2014. The team was deactivated at the end of 2016 due to the high operational tempo of the Wildcat fleet, but resumed flying air shows in 2019 as a solo display and returned to the traditional two-ship format for the second half of the 2024 season, and they've continued that into 2025.
And again, as they run back towards Crown Centre, camera's ready, you can see they're closing from a flat cross. Wildcat is crewed by pilot and observer.
Derived from the Lynx, the Wildcat entered service in 2014, and it's the Navy's primary anti-surface and anti-submarine warfare helicopter. It also serves in the light utility and search and rescue roles, and it's reportedly even capable of taking on I-Star duties.
There's a big handful of cycling in the aircraft. Rapid control climb again up to 100 feet or so. Feed the nose over one direction, now with the other.
At a glance, it looks a lot like a Lynx, albeit with a few extra sensors. But the Wildcat brings a whole new level of capability. 95% of the components are new. It has a more powerful engine, a longer range, a higher maximum takeoff weight, new rotors, new avionics, new radar, and, unlike the Lynx, a largely composite construction.
Transiting rearwards.
The final act of the day was the Chinook roll demonstration, which replaces the very popular Chinook displays that we enjoyed up until 2023. The roll demo consists of simpler manoeuvres than the display, and thus requires less training. It also puts less stress on the airframe. As a minor point of interest, this is a Chinook HC6. The solo displays traditionally used an HC6A, a much older airframe upgraded to modern standards, and last year's roll demo used an HC5, an extended range version. This is the first time that I can recall seeing a new build HC6 performing in a flying display.
To start the show, Cal's given us a wing over, rapidly turning back onto target, trading his speed for height and back again. The crew are now preparing in the cabin to drop off troops onto target. As the The aircraft turns in for a downwind quick stop. They will simulate a late spot at the landing site to offload troops and vehicles, either on or off the battlefield.
This year's roll demo is a bit different to last year's. There's no battlefield gun, but instead there's a demonstration of fast roping, albeit the troops are imaginary.
Become a Chinook pilot. Forget the rest of F1 DJ, best noise in the world, that bit of blade slap. The crew are now positioning for a fast roping approach, accelerating rapidly and accurately dispatch troops on a tight or otherwise unsuitable landing site. Think about rooftops or the deck of a ship, but today it's run to you, lucky devils. In the starboard door, you can see Josh kicking out the robot blades off the same as the ramp. Unfortunately, due to operational commitments, we don't have any troops to demonstrate for you today, but you will still see the ropes go out. Up to 30 troops will begin to pass the Hobbit Chinook in less than 2 minutes for that profile. Not just troops, stores of kit, and even some furry land sharks, more formally known as military working dogs, can go down these ropes, often giving the enemy pause for thought and let Spitfire whisker.
And to demonstrate how a Chinook can carry underslung loads, a 300-kilo quad bike is suspended underneath the helicopter.
The raw power and versatility of the Chinook is all down to its iconic tandem-motor design, even without rocker. It provides a huge amount of lift, a large cabin, is all achieved without any of that dangerous messing about with tail rotors. These road vehicles are not big fans of heights. The crew are moving the aircraft to counteract that swing of the load producers in the airplane. They're now returning to drop off the underslung load with an operational drop-off, combined with rapid drop of the load and the strop to egress away from the ground. Used in dusty or high-threat environments.
This roll demonstration brings us to the end of our coverage of the RAF Cosford Air Show 2025. Airshow dispatches will now take a mid-season break, not least so that I can focus on other airshow projects through June and July, including the official live broadcasts of Antidotum Airshow Leszno and the Royal International Air Tattoo, which will be provided by Plains TV.
Stepping off once more into a wing over, and they will now be positioning for a running landing. Definitely his real hands, he can be quite embarrassed about it. Make sure to give him a big wave as he goes past.
We'll be back towards the end of the summer with 2 further episodes, and while we no longer cover Leszno's Antidotum Air Show on this channel, we will still get our Leszno fix courtesy of their brand new and very innovative balloon night at the end of August. We'll see you then, but until that point, thanks for your company, and from me, Adam Landau, goodbye for now.